Yay. Thank you, Agata. So great to be here. I just love these sessions because this has got to be the greatest collection of public administrators and civic leaders that I know of. So it is always so great to be here. And I am doubly excited because rather than a presentation for me, I get to have a conversation with one of my favorite people, who's Tom Gilbert. And one of the reasons he's one of my favorite people is he's done something that I have been publicly on record saying was not possible, or certainly not something I've ever seen before, which is he has created something that's pretty close to a Consumer Reports review of technology companies for local governments. And I am not that old, but I have been doing this for about 25 years, as Agata was saying. And that is something I've heard local governments ask for, and I just haven't seen in any shape or form. So Tom is a really interesting person to me, and I'm glad I have a chance to have this conversation with him. And I think in the course of the conversation, we're going to learn some skills about procurement and what the process looks like, and certainly ways that we can make it better. And then I'm hoping Tom has an opportunity to show us this consumer reports that he's put together. And then we want to hear from you. And have a conversation about this. To get us going, I just wanted to kind of frame something around some research that I just completed. If you haven't seen, there's a report that I issued through a group called Rethink AI. Tom is also involved in it. Rethink AI, which is housed at New America, the policy group. And we put out a report on October 15th called Making AI Work for the Public. And in this report, which I believe is the most comprehensive assessment of local level AI, we found a very curious thing out there. Honestly, I was surprised by this, which is that a lot of the larger technology corporations like Microsoft and Google and OpenAI, and we know the big ones now, Anthropic, had been focusing on city governments, like in the smart cities days, and pulled out and sort of came to the conclusion, look, we don't really see the money right now in working with cities. We're going to focus on states. But cities have found that they are inundated, like literally dozens and dozens of companies every month are just bombarding them with new AI platforms and startups all over the place. It's just kind of a mess out there. And like in previous tech waves, they have said to me, hey, we need something to help navigate this space. And that's what we want to talk about today. Like, what does technology procurement look like? How can we do it better? What has Tom been up to? And all of that. So I'm going to ask a few questions. We're going to spend, I don't know, about 20 minutes or so kind of talking. Then maybe we'll have some time for demo, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. We have an ambitious agenda for the next, looks like 51 minutes together. And I want to start just to get a sense. I'm going to throw this out there. Tom, I think of as an entrepreneur, right? Sort of a business person making sense of public sector procurement. God love him. I want to ask, how did you get into this, Tom? How did you get into this space? Maybe we don't need to hear the whole life journey, but what got you here?
Thanks, Neil. And let me just say, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here again. That was a very generous introduction from Agata. I forgot how flowery that bio is about me. And yeah, it's good to see Neil as well. Neil and I have been working through the Rethink AI group that he mentioned. And yeah, I think this is a really important forum and really important setting, I think, not only for the work that I'm doing, but also for the work that I think is needed in AI right now. So to answer your question, Neil, I got interested in public procurement of technology because it seemed to me to be a really neglected but really important dimension of this larger problem, which some of you on this call may have heard of. That's kind of a buzzword, which is what's called the alignment problem. The alignment problem has been talked about in AI circles now for something like 10 years. So I've been in AI for about a decade, and this was sort of my entry point into the field, which is this question of like, okay, well, if we think that AI is on this exponential curve of improvement and performance and capability, some would even say intelligence, The question is, when when these agents, when these tools become arbitrarily sophisticated, arbitrarily powerful, how can we still make sure that they actually do the things that we want them to do? We often think about like the King Midas problem of like King Midas wishes everything he touches turns to gold. He gets his wish and then he dies of starvation after about a week. Okay. So you need to use these things very carefully. And so there was this big technical question. How can we design these tools so that no matter how powerful they are, they're always doing what their users intend? And actually for me, I was coming in as a social scientist. I was coming in as somebody who thought about institutions and organizations. And so for me, increasingly, solving that problem, I realized, was not really technical, it was socio-technical. And what that meant was it was about aligning expectations between vendors and purchasers. That the real alignment problem was not just AI versus humanity, it was big vendors versus often the public sector or people who represent the public interest. And so for me, as an entrepreneur, working on this problem of what tools, what products can we create to help make that problem more tractable, to help make procurement scalable, to help make it more transparent, more straightforward for both parties, that seemed like a much more productive and much needed lens on how to build AI and deploy it more responsibly, even as it matured.
That is totally fascinating. I don't think we've had this conversation before. So I just want to ask you about that because I want to make sure I understand. I mean, I heard what you said and I understand what you said, but I want to unpack it a little bit. So I get the alignment problem like with humans, right? And all
Mm.
kinds of AI theorists and engineers are talking about that. And you're sort of applying that to procurement, meaning vendors, and in this case, the public sector, which is fascinating. So I guess my question to you is, as someone who's been thoughtful about the alignment problem generally, are you saying that the alignment problem vis-a-vis vendors in the public sector could potentially get worse with AI? In a sense, it's already kind of difficult or challenging vendors and government. Are you saying AI might exacerbate that difficulty of government sort of having a good relationship with vendors through procurement?
Unfortunately, yes, I think that's the major structural risk. I think the risk is that as AI capabilities continue to mature, that on the one hand makes those tools much more powerful and possibly convenient on more and more use cases. But the flip side of that is that they become harder and harder to procure responsibly. And the reason for that is that, as you know, a lot of what procurement is about is aligning expectations between vendors and purchasers. Okay, can they describe what they've built in terms of the value that it can provide in ways they can stand behind and corroborate? And on the flip side, can the purchaser understand what the vendor just said and interpret it in the context of what their own needs are? And the problem is, and the technical term for this in AI is misspecification. But the problem is that the risk of that miscommunication and misalignment of expectations grows as the tools become more and more autonomous and more powerful. Imagine how much harder it would be to procure an agent that is autonomously managing your budget, answering your emails, basically managing your relationships with constituents and with coworkers versus even just using a chatbot, which might just automate certain kinds of tasks and you might just use it to proofread stuff. And even a chatbot is often quite capable now in terms of what you can see from ChatGPT, and just every 2 weeks they make it more and more powerful. So unfortunately, I think that the inertia, the natural state is going to be that as AI advances, the public sector will be increasingly left behind just because they won't have an understanding of what they're buying, and vendors won't bother to try and tell them, or often won't even understand themselves what the limits of these tools really is.
And so it sounds like you're saying the potential danger is that the tools will become so sophisticated and opaque in a sense that it might be more difficult to procure. And it doesn't sound like you're saying that's the issue, and it's less the issue that vendors are trying to use AI to hoodwink the public sector. It's more that it's just so complex and having AI agents run things is so intense that we in the public sector just have to do like 100 times better job making sure we know what we're getting.
Yeah, that's right. So what I would to distill that, the way I would put it is as the technology becomes inherently more mature, that compounds the risk of miscommunication
Right.
and it
Right.
compounds the risk of different stages of procurement going awry or taking much longer than they need to.
Got it. Okay, so I want to ask you another question that's related, which is given what you just said, for those in the audience that might not actually be procurement professionals, how would you characterize, some of the main reasons why procurement is generally difficult to do in the US at like the state or the sub-state level? Like, why is it, and in a sense, kind of take AI out of it for a moment, just like why is it difficult to do procurement here?
That's a great question. There's a much longer conversation to be had that would be exhaustive, so I can just say a few things right now. This is also something we can open up for discussion, but I think there's several reasons why procurement is difficult. One reason is that procurement is inherently multifaceted and procedural. It includes many different stages, and it should, to be clear, there's a reason for that. But it really is quite exhausting, especially if you're procuring something large. So in procurement, a typical procurement timeline, even for a technology, could be something on the order of like up to a year or multiple years, depending on how many legacy systems it's expected to interact with. And even if you were to look at the actual procurement life cycle, you're looking at stating the need, the initial stage of that, then there's sourcing of different vendors or different options. Then there might be after that a more formal solicitation where certain vendors or a certain subset are invited to bid for access to a certain kind of contract. Then what you would then proceed to is some kind of negotiation phase where some further subset of those vendors are being spoken to. And then after that, there might be a further specification of, exactly what the implementation or piloting might look like, especially in the case of a relatively recent technology. The department in question, the procurement team, might be interested in even trying to spin up its own in-house version of a tool in order to compare that against what vendors are telling them, or vice versa. It's very easy for new vendors to enter in at future stages and say, oh, we heard about this bidding process. We can actually provide a compelling alternative. That could slow things down. So, to be clear, none of these things are nefarious. None of these things are malicious. None of these things are necessarily bad. I mean, these are in fact important decisions, and there are in fact many inherently different decision points involved in the soup to nuts process of starting with a blue sky of like, what might we need in order to improve, the road network of the city of San Jose to an actual new tool that's going to optimize traffic flow by like 10% year over year, right? That's a very involved question. But I think the problem, and maybe this is where we get more into the AI side of it, is that the kinds of expertise, the kinds of knowledge, and the kinds just of tests that would need to be conducted and verified in order for each of those decisions even to be made, let alone to be made responsibly, becomes massively more difficult because the technology is so new, its development moves so quickly, and almost all of the expertise around it is housed at precisely the companies that cities are trying to negotiate and contract with. So again, it's not nefarious, but there's a profound information asymmetry, power asymmetry, and just inherent risk of miscommunication that can happen when there is nothing approaching a level playing field between these different parties.
So I want to stay on this for a moment and just thinking about the procurement process in government and then thinking about it a bit more in relation to AI. And so what you described to me sound like the greatest challenge that you articulated is, in a sense, kind of the complicated, segmented, highly segmented aspect of procurement, meaning there's all these different processes and stages, and within each of those stages, the procurement officer or procurement office has to interface with many others, whether those be vendors or other departments or the people who are trying to purchase
Mhm.
the services. There's like so much going on. Like another aspect of this that I've always thought was challenging, and I'd like to see if you agree, and seems like it'll be compounded by AI, is that procurement happens generally in anonymity. It's just not something that most people get involved in or think about unless they have to. Right. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like HR in that regard. Like a lot of people sort of view it as, well, that's the thing we have to have within our organization. But unless I have to be involved in HR decisions, most people like stay away. In a similar vein, I sort of feel like procurement is not the kind of thing that like a new mayor or city manager or governor comes to office and says, I'm so excited about procurement. I want to kind of help get involved and invite me to all the different meetings. And so when you describe this like multi-headed hydra of a process that tends to operate on its own or pull people in only when it's needed, and then as you're saying, AI, or let me stop there for a moment and say, I also hear a lot from procurement officers, if anything, they'd like more people involved. They want more sunshine splashed on the process. And especially when they're working with people that will actually use the services, whatever the department is, they would like more contact and relationship there. It seems like AI might compound that issue because, as you're saying, it's such a complex and sort of opaque technology that has to be purchased in its own right. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that sort of complex, segmented, disparate nature of the process, the need to have more sunlight and collaboration, and how AI impacts or compounds that those challenges.
Yeah, that's a great prompt. So, my company released a white paper earlier this year that touches on several of those themes. And so the basically what we argued there, I'll give you guys the TLDR of what that paper says. So the way that chatbots and agents and broader in a broader sense, generative AI is designed, basically uses a method. Which you may have heard the term fine tuning before. It has an even more technical descriptor I won't go into. But basically, what that means is that there's kind of a foundation of capability, and then there's an additional fine tuning stage where, and that can take the form of red teaming, it can take the form of tests, it can take the form of basically trying to make those capabilities robust to specific use cases. The way in which that technology, that method is set up right now has this other effect, which is that it tends to put the user of these technologies in a relatively passive position. In other words, what it means is it invites the user to automate a lot of what they're doing in a way that they can just allow the chatbot, for example, to do for them, rather than inviting them to reflect on what a good outcome would be, right? So the idea is that you're supposed to trust OpenAI or trust, Anthropic or any of these other huge vendors with having their own criteria of what a good email is, or a good PowerPoint, or a good budget, or a good, like, whatever it is, or a good solicitation, right? And so, unfortunately, the paradigm often ends up being that a lot of critical faculties and critical decisions end up being something that we're not empowered by AI to make better, but that we just end up automating to the tools. And that's where it intersects, I think, with this culture of procurement you're discussing, which is the fact that procurement already is so often anonymous makes it, from a technical standpoint, relatively straightforward to automate and make even more passive and even more, frankly, de-skilled. And that's tragic and it's quite harmful because what it means is, and this I'm afraid to say, this is the future that by default we would be headed towards, is one in which cities and states and the federal level become even worse at scoping their own needs. They become even more enfeebled and unable to articulate what a good set of outcomes or good behaviors would be from whatever they're trying to procure because it becomes so convenient to just trust whatever is being brought to market and say, well, the company stands behind this, and so we're just going to wash our hands of it. And that becomes a doom loop pretty quickly, I'm sorry to say.
As you're talking, and this happens a lot with these AI conversations, I can't help but think of that movie Wall-E, where you have all the humans that are catered to by their AI robots, and they get a little tubby and lazy over the course of time, and we certainly don't want that. And as I know, and working closely with public officials and administrators, like these folks are like the opposite of that. They want to tenaciously do what's needed for their residents. And so I think now might be the time to ask you to show us what you got, because I'm hearing, just like to summarize what I'm hearing from you, that what's really important is for us to be proactive, not reactive, when it comes to purchasing AI and moving forward. It's important to be collaborative more than it was before. And it's really important to have as much sunshine or light or transparency in terms of AI and what's happening. And it's important to sort of boil down in simple terms that are genuine, that have a high level of veracity. What is it that these tools do? So I'm kind of curious, like, what have you done? Maybe you could take a few moments and demonstrate for us what you put together in the spirit of how to do better procurement with AI.
I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, let me share my screen so I can jump into giving you guys a bit of a live demo here. Can everybody see that? Let's confirm that screen is being shared. Looks good. Okay. So yeah, this is basically this is what we built. Actually, as Neil said at the start of this meeting, yeah, basically what the way I would describe this is we've created a platform that is intended to serve as like a consumer reports for AI tooling. And it's really intended to address some of these information asymmetries and power asymmetries that we've been discussing in this culture of procurement, and also to corroborate what Neil was just saying, to build in structural forms of transparency, collaboration, and accountability. And it turns out that, it really is possible to productize some of these things. It is possible to create software that makes it so that those asymmetries can be addressed, be made tractable, and fitted into the process of what it would mean to procure. So I'm happy to kind of talk us through this as I show some key features of this. I will also predicate this by saying that we are going live with this next week with the GovAI Coalition. So the GovAI Coalition is a network of originally based in San Jose, but it's a nationwide network of cities and chief data officers, chief privacy officers across the country that often do find themselves in this position of looking for what best practices mean when adopting AI tools. And so we'll be formally presenting this at their summit next week, but I'm happy to give you guys a preview of how this works. Everything I'm showing is live. So this is all the features I'm showing you are fully backed up and fully ready to go. So the bread and butter is this dashboard, and the dashboard is where you imagine you're a procurement official, or imagine you're an IT specialist at a city or at the municipal level. Basically, this is intended to be your one-stop shop for sourcing tools. We currently list, you may have seen on the landing page, over 1,000 different AI tools that you can filter according to use case or according to domain, and then compare them with each other. That's the vision. This is what we're building. We actually do have a tutorial here, which I'm happy to show. I can talk you guys through this, but this is what new users always see when they log in. So the idea here, and the name of the tool is Hortus Trellis. So I can also say, Hortus is the name of my company. Hortus is the Latin word for garden, which fits this vision of creating an ecosystem for AI procurement and adoption that is healthy and that is vibrant and that does serve the public interest. Trellis is in a garden context, the thing that plants climb up in order to reach the sunlight. So there's a lot of we had fun with those metaphors in building the product. But in terms of the actual features, we have an AI marketplace, which is basically a set of listings of lots of different AI tools. As I mentioned, there's over 1,000 total, but that includes lots of different things. So to Neil's point, we don't just list chatbots. We don't just list agents. I think we've kind of forgotten in this post-ChatGPT moment, there's really hundreds of different ways of building AI. And so we also list our data sets, we list repositories, We list multimodal systems. We list lots of different things that we organize by use case. So the idea is that if a procurement team is approached by a vendor and the vendor says, hey, we've built the best in class tool for predictive policing, take it or leave it, our hope would be that those teams could then use our tool and search the marketplace and say, okay, Mr. Vendor, well, we found a half a dozen other tools that seem to also be well corroborated in terms of these listings for being relevant to that use case. What's your response? And then that's a different conversation than the one that would have happened otherwise. So that's really what the purpose of the marketplace is. You can either search in natural language for your own keywords, or you can use our pre-established filters to find what you may be looking for. You can create projects, which is basically where you would state your need, like some of the earliest stages of procurement. Basically, what are we looking for? If we're the city of San Jose, what are we working on right now? Where do we want traffic to be a year from now? Do we want to improve the way citizens interact with certain government services? Those needs can be stated in a project. We have an analytics tab, which is like once you're actually piloting or deploying an AI tool, you can actually begin to see how that performance looks against what those originally stated goals were in the project listing. In terms of the projects themselves, projects are a very useful way for jurisdictions to either share knowledge with each other. So any project you create, you can share with other jurisdictions. So for example, again, I live in Oakland. So if I'm the city of Oakland and let's say I'm interested in procuring a tool that could be used to help optimize or monitor traffic flow across the city of Oakland. If I want to, I can share my project with people in Buffalo, New York, or people in uh, Carbondale, Illinois, or people in Jacksonville, Florida, and I can say, hey, other folks, I know I've met you guys at other conferences, I've met you on the circuit of procurers. We can actually share and share listings with each other and compare them against not just each of our needs, but together, maybe even pool our resources and approach these vendors on a different footing. So it's an opportunity to share knowledge. It's an opportunity to communicate directly with the vendors. And it's also an opportunity, even after you log out and you might not touch this for a little bit of time, you can always log back in and the listings will still be there. Your projects are saved. You can put as many listings as you want into your project. And so it's really intended to be something where the procurement doesn't have to stop and start, stop and start. It doesn't have to sputter. It can be a living repository of your own needs and you seeing in real time where the state of the entire AI market ecosystem is at meeting those needs. And then we also have this is just an opportunity to share feedback with us in terms of the actual platform. So yeah, those are the key features right now. I have some pre-built projects here that I use just for demoing purposes. You can see I've kind of pretended to be the city of Austin or the city of San Mateo, and you can see some examples here of what these fact sheets are. As I said, these are all real, so these are all actual tools, and I can actually maybe even show, here's a traffic prediction tool that was uploaded, where you can actually see these are opportunities to communicate with the vendor right here. There's an opportunity to provide ratings on the listing through this interface right here. These comments will go straight to the vendor, and you can ask questions about the listing based on that. All the listings are consistent across all the vendors on the marketplace. So we assess each of these tools not just on their own, but in the context of where they sit in this wider ecosystem. So every vendor every listing would show an overview of what the tool is, its purpose, the domain it's intended for, transportation in this case, information about training data and test data. It does get increasingly technical as you go down. So depending on the technical capacity of the procurement team, they can either look at this themselves or they can choose to share their project with other procurement teams that might have more of that expertise and say, hey, can you help us review this listing? We might be interested in joining on a procurement with you to move forward with this. And so there's a lot of the other stuff you can do here. It's really intended to be like a robust one-pager that would provide enough information to decide, hey, is this a vendor that we want to have a conversation with or not? And the answer might be no. You don't have to move forward right now. Our purpose is not to shove tools down anybody's throat. Our purpose is to be a clearinghouse so you can see of what's out there, how much, if any of it, can actually meet our needs. In terms of the actual marketplace, I'll just show very quickly here. Again, it's intended to be either, as simple as possible. You can either just search for your own needs here in whatever language you want, or you can filter by these domains. We have five by default: healthcare, education, transportation, criminal justice, administration. For example, if I select healthcare, what that will do is filter for all of the tools that have been selected and fitted into like some healthcare application. And those are sorted by a mix of how relevant they are to that search criteria against how well they score based on our own assessments. So, for example, this tool, you can see we provide two different scores based on how complete the listing is and also how high quality the actual responses are from the vendor on that listing. And we do run our own tests on this information to confirm what information the vendor has provided is in fact independently verifiable. So basically, this is the intended structure, and so the idea is that people can find if there's anything they're looking for that's on here, we can support that. We're constantly adding more vendors and more tools. We're always adding more use cases. Teams can also choose to petition to add use cases. I just had a team earlier today that added the predictive policing use case, and so we're reviewing that right now to get that listed on our marketplace. And so our goal is for this to be, as scalable and as service worthy to as many different, municipal procurement teams as possible in the context of AI adoption.
Excellent. Thank you. And as always, I'm just always astounded because I don't know why, but I didn't think we would be able to do this in the public sector, and I'm glad that we have it now. So Tom, are you up for some questions now, or was there more you wanted to share?
There is a lot more I could share, but I think it's better if we transition to questions. I haven't looked at the comments, but it looks like there's a lot. So
There's a
maybe,
lot. There's a lot. So
yeah.
I'm going to try and get us through, and if folks have specific questions about Trellis and the dashboard and all of that, please submit some questions now. I am going to try and quickly work through about a dozen questions that we got in. So Tom, you don't have to worry about it. I'm trying to sort of pick the ones that seem most useful to us. So let me start with just the basic question that came out. Is this free? And where can one access this now for the folks tuning in?
That's a great question. So in order to sign up for access, since that was the question, if you go to our company website, that's hortus.ai, there is a form you can fill out. There's a button at the bottom that says sign up for access. So we've just now entered open beta. And so if you want to be part of that open beta and have preferred early access, I would encourage folks to go to that website and just fill out that Google form sheet there with your email and other information. And a member of my team will follow up with you very soon to basically work with you to get access.
Great. And then there's another good question while the trellis is fresh on our mind, which is, and I really appreciate this question. It's about the whole notion of risk management. And as you know, for very good reasons, a lot of procurement officers are conservative. And so the question is essentially, do you have a risk score, and do you have a risk management framework that you used or that procurement officers should use when they engage with a dashboard like this?
That's an excellent question. So yes, the answer is yes. So that there are two scores for every tool, as I showed. One is for the completion check, and then the other is for the quality check, basically. So the quality check is based off of a few different risk management frameworks. So for example, the NIST AI risk management framework, which comprises basically voluntary best practices that the National Institute of Standards and Technology has developed when it comes to basically all the topics we've discussed, is a basis for how we run those assessments. So basically, what we do is we check every listing for conformity with that RMF, along with a few other tests for safety, security, privacy, and I believe also just performance of the tool on the use cases the vendor has flagged. There are additional ISO standards that we have implemented into our product roadmap and which will go live with the marketplace soon.
Great. And then this is a little bit of a technical question, but to me, it sort of brings up an issue that I always puzzle through, which is that I sort of think of Hortus and this Trellis dashboard as like almost like a nonprofit or like a public benefit corporation. So I'm always trying to kind of reconcile that. And this is an interesting question here, which is that the vendors that are participating on the dashboard obviously are doing so in a voluntary basis. Whereas if they applied to work with government or to receive a contract, they have to go through a whole raft of government approvals. So the question is, does Hortus need to go through a raft of government approvals to be used by government, or is it something that you found government procurement officers or others can just like start using it?
Uh, That's a good question. So basically, the way we've handled that right now is that we are registered in SAM.gov and a lot of the other kind of standard table stakes settings for tools and platforms to be able to be used by government. And so we have those certifications in hand. And if anybody has questions that are more specific than that, I'd be happy to follow up with them either over email or on a quick call. But yeah, I think the other side of it is there's really nothing preventing the tool from currently being used. We have data security practices that are adopted that are best in class. We're implementing additional security features right now. So all the information that either procurement teams or otherwise would upload to the platform is going to be data secure. And we have both in terms of it gets a bit technical, but basically both in terms of the API and also in terms of the actual data storage. Both of those things are protected in ways that are standard for this type of system.
And then this is going backwards to the risk management piece, but there was a really good question in terms of your thinking and the framework that you use. Is there, from a risk perspective, how do you balance the risk between cost savings and legal issues? Meaning you can be sued for AI going wrong, right? And so when thinking about risk, maybe some of this is just your advice. When thinking about risk, should the focus be on cost saving? Should it be on, mitigating legal exposure? Both? How do you think about that balance?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so it's rapidly evolving as AI itself matures. I think often what we're seeing is that the way those types of risks are, because really what that boils down to is how would you price risk, right? And so we're seeing a few different ways that's happening. There are insurance markets actually for AI systems and use cases that are now maturing. And so basically what that means is like the same way you have car insurance, for example, the question that's now germinating very much with a lot of startups and with their partnerships with bigger firms is how can we price basically liability for performance on the things that we're claiming performance on? And so what that really means is the answer I think to that is ends up becoming market driven. So basically what we're seeing is there's a market for how much and what kinds of risk end up manifesting in terms of price on different kinds of uses. And so that's one reason we have those different domains. And we have internally, I think now 800 different use cases on which we rate these tools. As those standards, as those prices, frankly, mature, we are adding those in to those use cases in order to assess the tools. Basically, is the value that the vendor is promising actually reflecting what we're seeing in terms of the potential risk of like what a misuse or hallucination or some other misplaced performance would be from what we're seeing from other vendors.
Great. My head is really swimming because there's so many of these topics are so interesting, and that one is just fascinating in terms of the marketplace for AI insurance. But I'm going to keep my mind in check. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to go backwards to some of the very first set of questions that were not necessarily relevant to Trellis, but I think are more general questions about AI and procurement. So Tom, I'm going to ask those to you. And for those that are out there, I apologize if we're not calling you out, but if you think that I am not accurately representing your question, I guess please break in. But just in the sake of there's so many wonderful questions and I'm trying to get them all out, I am just kind of narrating these to Tom. So here's the question, and again, I picked up on this. I found it so interesting. It's kind of about states and how states are in a pretty good position to teach us a few things about procurement, but also computational infrastructure.
Mhm.
And I thought a lot about this for this report that I mentioned we just issued that's in the chat, calling Making AI Work for the Public. And in this report, I was really surprised to find that states are much more in the lead at the moment, because this could change, but much more in the lead in terms of AI sophistication and adoption. And the reason I'm surprised is that for previous waves of new technology hitting the scene, it's really been more cities that have been experimental and sort of at the cutting edge of making sense of that technology. I think that's completely flipped this time. And you really have states leading, and governors in particular are really sort of kind of raising the flag that they want to be known for AI in all kinds of ways. And so then, of course, I myself have been getting lots of questions about, well, why is that? What's going on out there? And I think there are a lot of reasons that this is happening, but I want to focus on the one reason that was put in the chat, that in 2020, connected to the pandemic, states were pushed, I think, more than any other level of government to up their sort of data game and to up computational infrastructure. So because of the pandemic, there was this really, like don't let a crisis go to waste situation where states really got pretty darn sophisticated in all kinds of ways around data and IT. So the question is, are there things we can learn from that movement around 2020 where states became more sophisticated that broadly other governments can benefit from in terms of where states are now?
Um, yeah, that's a great question. So basically, I think where states are now, yeah, a lot of this has to do, I think, with the kind of AI moment. So to put it mildly, I don't think that the federal government is doing us many favors right now when it comes to defining what responsible AI adoption or really any kind of even standardized AI adoption looks like at the state or the local level. That's one dynamic. I think another dynamic is that AI itself inherently is a quite capital intensive technology, which is to say, if what you're looking for is what are often, I think, somewhat pretentiously called foundation models or frontier models, these are often tools that, frankly, now take billions of dollars even to create, let alone to deploy. And so what that means is I'm afraid that, and Neil's the resident expert on this, but I'll just summarize my understanding of it, that unlike previous waves of like smart city programs and adoption, cities themselves are even more at risk of being at the mercy of just the scale of this technology because it's incredibly difficult for these cities, both in lacking the talent, lacking the data, and frankly, just lacking the computation in order to provide any other window or lens on those foundational capabilities. I can only speak for what we've built. So one reason we put so much currency and so much importance on sharing projects, sharing information, communicating directly with vendors, like as Neil was describing, structural forms of transparency and collaboration, even across jurisdictions, let alone across teams. That is enormously powerful because what it means is it provides these opportunities to counter the incredibly capital intensive nature of this technology because it means that you could imagine half a dozen or even a dozen different cities that each of them might have a population of no more than like 50 or 100,000 people, but together might end up having a much greater purchasing and negotiation power and suddenly leapfrogging up to like, hey, maybe we can even procure a tool collectively and pool our resources around what defining use cases would mean so that we're actually able to adopt this in something closer to the way that we want rather than in whatever way the vendor has decided is one size fits all just because it works for their preferred enterprise customers.
And
But yeah, please go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, you bring up another question that somebody asked, which is, and I'm not saying this is like you have a socialist agenda or anything, but do you have a not so hidden agenda with all of this to create a public sector cooperative marketplace when it comes to AI procurement?
Yeah, I mean, I think a public option for AI would be awesome. And there are states, for example, like Empire AI in New York, and others as well. California has also considered this about what would it take for us to create our own public version, in-house developed version of AI. So, that's an interesting model. I think where we sit, I'll just say two things. We see our role as creating and providing the infrastructure needed for a transparent, fair, relatively equitable marketplace to exist, right? Exactly what gets bought or not, that's not for us to like, that's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to give people the information and the feedback, types and the data that they would need to make whatever decision it is in their wheelhouse to make. And so what that means for us is, we're creating a win-win-win condition here. Vendors that play ball, that are forthright, that are responsive to questions, that document richly and clearly, that provide and develop tools that do pass the checks for compliance and standards and best practices that I see some comments have brought up, they'll be listed more prominently on our marketplace. They'll be among the first listed, and they should be because they'll have demonstrated that they're more trustworthy. That doesn't guarantee that they'll, be the first unicorn on a given use case, but it does mean they're more likely to get traction. It does mean they're more likely, certainly, to get visibility. And then that's also good for procurement teams and for cities because it means that they have a ready, very easy way to see like what the top 6 vendors are worth looking at for the use case that we're currently concerned with. And on top of which, every contract or every negotiation or every interaction between the trustworthy vendors and the informed procurement teams, that's one more conversation than would have otherwise happened without our platform. And that benefits the public. That benefits stakeholders, that benefits constituents, that benefits the city, that benefits all sorts of people who, for one reason or another, unfortunately, are often left outside of the procurement process and left outside of providing a way to inform how procurements should proceed.
Another question that's connected to evaluating the vendors on the platform is, are you including sort of the big incumbent players like the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, and how are they treated?
That's a great question. So I think it follows from what I just said. Our primary goal here is to create a more level playing field, which means a couple things. Any vendor that is willing to play according to the standard template that I showed you guys is more than welcome to be listed on our platform. That being said, what they are promising needs to be proportionately documented and verifiable. So if a vendor is providing a tool that is relatively simple, like a machine learning classifier that checks whether an email is spam or not, that will require some documentation, but frankly, not anywhere near as much documentation as a tool that an agent, say, that is going to claim to like automate city budgeting for the next year. Okay. That's a very different threshold of not just performance, but of verifiability, accountability, reporting. Okay, like what does recourse look like over a tool like that? And so we basically would, the vendors that we would list, it's like, okay, Microsoft, okay, Google, you want to deploy some new version of Gemini, let's say, that's going to be able to play that role. Okay, where's your documentation for it? Can you provide a demo? Can you give us access to the tool to run our own tests on it? Can you confirm compliance? How often are you going to retrain it? Can you specialize it to different jurisdictions? If you can't, why should we still take you seriously? If you can, what does that look like? You see, a lot of additional questions just organically emerge as the capabilities of the AI itself mature and become more ambitious. And so our purpose is to both keep pace with that development while also nudging it in a direction that stays aligned with the public interest.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm taking away from what you're saying is that the more sort of collectively, there is this cooperative marketplace and governments coming together to get organized on their own and possibly organized through this dashboard, the more the Microsofts and the Googles of the world are going to take it seriously, take the collective power of government seriously, and address the very reasonable questions that you have to be in that marketplace. Is that a fair?
I think collective bargaining is a massively useful tool for achieving collective outcomes. It has been up to now almost entirely absent from AI. A lot of the purpose of what we have built is to manifest it in the context of increasingly advanced capabilities when they are brought to or near the public sector.
Great. So I believe Agata needs the last few minutes for wrap up, but I'm going to ask one more time, Tom, and I asked this because I saw it in the chat. Someone asked, is this free? Do we have to pay for it? What does that look like? So maybe if you could remind us what costs, if any, look like to have any interface with the dashboard, and maybe remind us one more time how best folks can get in touch with you and stay connected to the work you're doing. And then also I'll reiterate what you were saying before, that you are working with GovAI Coalition that has state and city representatives. And I'll just personally say, I think GovAI is great and is the closest thing I've seen of a collective marketplace out there. So if folks are not connected to that group, they should be connected as well. But Tom, just remind us again how we stay in touch with you and maybe how this might cost or how local governments might be able to engage with you.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a few different pricing tiers depending on exactly which types of features teams might be interested in. We do have an individual rate, which is just for people to be able to use this in isolation from like just as you as a person, if you just want to play around with it. We have a team rate, which is intended more for procurement teams, and then we also have custom pricing for like full across soup to nuts organizational implementations. I would encourage people to reach out either to me or through our website if you would like to learn more about exactly which features might fit into different buckets. We do also have, as Neil again said, a partnership with the GovAI Coalition where their members do have preferred access to certain features of the platform. So if people have any more specific questions, please do just shoot me an email directly. I'd be happy to schedule a call and provide either an updated demo or just more information about where things stand with access. And otherwise, I would encourage people to look at updates that will be coming out next week at the GovAI Coalition Summit, where we will be giving a presentation on the tool and addressing their audience in more detail.
Excellent. So I wanted to save the last couple of minutes for wrap up, but I also want to just say something here, which I usually don't, which is this is the last workshop I believe we're going to have with our team lead, Jess Silverman. And as tenaciously as we all work for our residents and our local governments, hopefully, you know, and if not, I'm telling you now, Jess Silverman has tenaciously worked to make sure everything we do at Innovate US is high quality. So I just want to thank Jess. Jess, I don't know if you can come on live and just at least wave and maybe help us wrap up this awesome session that we had. Thank you, Tom Gilbert, for being here as well.
Thanks so much, Neil, and congrats, Jess. You've been an enormous help, and thanks to Agata as well for helping to arrange this. I really enjoyed this. It's a pleasure to interact with this audience, and it's just such an important venue, I think, for these conversations.
Jess, can we give you the last word? Uh-oh.
Oh.
Or Agata?
I am here, but I mean, we are very sad of missing Jess, and has been a pleasure to have her. I mean, doing everything right. She's absolutely the best. And thank you so much, everybody, for attending. This workshop has been just amazing, Tom and Neil. I mean, and also I think we have the record of questions in one workshop is around 25, and not only just, you know, simple questions, like very, very complex questions. So I am saving all the questions and sending to Tom because I think he will be interested in learning more about all our participants have to say. It has been amazing. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, here's Jess. Here's Jess.
Thank you, Jess and Agata and Tom. Great to see everyone.
Thank you. And I am going to close the session. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending.